Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Grey Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today is the 21st of February, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, bit of drama over the weekend about an attacker targeting NFT users or NFT kind of like holders here that were using OpenSea. Now, this wasn't a bug with OpenSea's contracts or an exploit on OpenSea's behalf, but they copped all the flack for it, of course, because they are the largest NFT marketplace by far. But there's this great thread that from Niso here from Gem that broke down exactly what happened. But the TLDR is that a bunch of users were victims of a phishing attack, which made them sign things. Well, not made them, but like prompted them to sign things with their Ethereum wallet that they shouldn't have been signing because it gave the attacker the ability to sell their NFTs. Now, I've gone on about this before on the refill about how you have to be really careful about what you sign. What transactions you sign, what messages you sign, all that sort of stuff. And I've spoken about how there are various kind of like hardware wallets out there, and some of them will show you what you're signing, some of them won't, some of them will give you more detail than others. Like the Lattice one gives you a lot of detail because there's a bigger screen on it. The Ledger Nano S, and Trezor both have small screens. They won't give you that much information to go off of. So being careful about what you sign is always prudent. But this one was, a bit shitty because it was part of a phishing attack. Now, what that means is that basically, from what I understand, a bunch of people got an email that looked like it came from OpenSea. And because OpenSea has a contract migration going on right now, basically, there actually was a legitimate email that OpenSea sent out. And then the phishing email was sent out as well that kind of like copied that and prompted users to sign something after going to the link that allowed the attacker to gain access to be able to sell their NFTs. Now, what the attacker did was sold a bunch of NFTs way below their kind of like actual value, so people scooped them up straight away, and the attacker got away with some money, and then people lost their really prized NFTs. And as far as I can tell, there wasn't that much damage, or in terms of like how many people were affected. I think I saw a number being thrown around that 32 people were affected. Obviously, really crappy for them, but it wasn't like there was thousands of people affected by this exploit or anything like that. And I think the attacker ended up getting away with about $1.7 million after selling a bunch of NFTs, but I didn't kind of like look too deep into the on-chain stuff about what was happening there, but I did just want to kind of like talk about it because, one, I feel kind of like bad for OpenSea that they copped all this kind of like heat over it when it actually wasn't OpenSea's fault that this happened. Two, as I said, like I think people need to be made aware of kind of like how risky it is to sign things you don't understand what you're signing, and how easily it is to actually become a victim of a phishing attack. Now, some of you know that I used to work in cybersecurity, so I'm obviously well aware of this sort of stuff. But the average user is definitely not well aware of this stuff. Like phishing is a very lucrative industry because it's very easy to trick people into clicking things when you pretend to be someone that they trust, right? Like, it's kind of like phishing is like an online thing, but it kind of falls into the whole social engineering playbook. It's funny because like you see stories of people being able to just kind of like walk into places because they look the part. Imagine if you just dress up as like a janitor and you walk into a secure office building and people let you in because they think you're the janitor, right? And this has been done in movies and things like that. I'm sure you guys have seen this before, but it works. Like, the thing is that subconsciously, we don't really think about these sorts of things. Like, we see someone in uniform and we automatically assume that they're meant to be there. We don't automatically assume that someone is kind of like impersonating them, trying to gain access to places that they shouldn't. And the same is true for online phishing. Like, if you get an email that looks exactly like one that's coming from OpenSea, for example, same text, same message, same kind of like color scheme, same everything, same font, you're, subconsciously, a lot of the time, you're just going to trust it and you're just going to click on that link. And this is why phishing is so lucrative, because it's very easy to trick people. Now, obviously, there are a bunch of protections in place on, the email provider side. Like, obviously, if you're using Gmail, they'll filter a lot of stuff out for you. Same with any kind of like modern email provider. They'll filter a lot of stuff out. But the problem is that like a lot of their detection mechanisms are based on things that are kind of like known, and then if there's more sophisticated attacks or targeted phishing attacks, it's very hard for them to actually pick up on that and kind of block that. And they also have to play a balancing act because they don't want to be filtering things to spam that are actually not spam and then piss off all their users. So it's kind of like a balancing act there as well for the mail providers. But generally, I think the best advice that I can give is to just like when dealing with kind of like signing anything, especially when you've clicked off a link from like an email or something, just be extra vigilant. Like, and bookmark the sites that you regularly go on. Like if you're using Uniswap regularly, or kind of like Maker regularly, or Compound, like whatever app you're using regularly, OpenSea as well. Make sure you bookmark the website and just go to that. Don't go to like third-party links and stuff like that, and always make sure that the URL you're visiting is the one that you're supposed to be visiting, especially for high-value kind of like purchases there. And if you've got a Lattice one, definitely take advantage of the fact that you can see the transaction that you're signing. I know, the funny thing is, I know this sounds like a lot of steps to protect yourself, but this is what self-sovereignty is, guys. This is what going bankless is. Like, there's only so much, like, I guess, like, the actual interfaces can do to warn you about this stuff. But if you ignore the warnings and just go for it and start signing just anything, well, then that's kind of like on you. And I think that's why a lot of people are actually scared to self-custody, or scared to actually get into interact with things, because they're like, oh, one kind of like bad move and I'll kind of lose everything. I mean, look, I kind of understand that, but at the same time, it's not that bad. Like, you just have to have basic due diligence. To me, having basic due diligence when interacting with things on chain, it's kind of like how you have basic basic risk assessment in real life. Like, you don't cross the road without looking before you do it, right? Or without kind of waiting at a pedestrian crossing. It's the same thing with signing a transaction. Like, it doesn't take long to just make sure that you know what you're signing and make sure that you're on the right website. Just like it doesn't take long for you to look both ways before you cross the street. And I think once you get into that mindset of protecting yourself just as like a second nature thing online, not just with crypto, but with everything, you'll protect yourself against the vast majority of things. Because a lot of the time, the scammers, they're just doing a shotgun approach. They're just sending, like, they're casting a massive net, and then, say they send like a phishing email to like 1 million people. Well, even if they only get 1% of those people to click on it, that's still a lot of people, right? That's 10,000 people that they've gotten to click on a link, and then maybe only 1% of those actually follow through and sign a malicious transaction, or follow through with the scam. That's 100 people. So it's still successful for them. That's why this keeps happening, is because obviously so many people use kind of like crypto, so many people use the internet in general, and you only need to capture a very small percentage of the total that you send these things to in order for the scam to be worth it. So don't be that 1%. Don't get caught in that. Just do the basic due diligence and risk assessment on certain things, especially high value transactions. Like, if you're sending 50% of your portfolio somewhere, I mean, you're going to want to like quadruple check the address that you're sending it to, right? And you want to make sure that when you sign the transaction as well, it actually has the address that you intended to send it to. Because sometimes, as I've discussed before, there's a thing called a man-in-the-middle attack, where they can actually have a piece of software on your computer and then swap out your address with another address, and then you sign it thinking that you're sending the tokens to your own address, when in reality you aren't. So I think, and like for lower value things, for everyday stuff, you probably don't have to go that far. But I mean, for me personally, I can't remember a time where I was kind of like, when I fell victim to any of this sort of stuff. Like, even from like the get-go, I don't think I've fallen victim to any of this kind of like stuff before. And I think that's just because I've practiced good due diligence. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that I can't in the future. I mean, there's definitely people that you expect to be kind of like experts in this, and they can still get kind of like fished. And like when people kind of like target you with phishing, it's even worse. This is called spear phishing, where they actually do like hyper-targeted stuff to you, and it's naive to think that you're an expert and you can resist it all, bragging about and being like, oh, I've resisted everything, no one can hack me. I mean, one, you're actually encouraging the hackers, and two, I mean, that the thing is that it's going to sting a lot more when you actually do get fished. And it's not just kind of like phishing via email. It's like on Discord, like someone DMing you to pretending to be someone else, someone like doing it on Twitter, and just tricking you, just basically using all these social engineering tactics to trick you into doing something that they want. And it only takes one slip up, guys, a lot of the time for these sorts of things. Like, literally, it only takes you signing something you shouldn't have, or sending money to someone you shouldn't have, for you to kind of like lose things. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. I think, just generally, there's plenty of resources out there for protecting yourself. I think MyCrypto has a really great security guide. So if you want to just Google MyCrypto security guide or something, I think there's a bunch of blog posts around that as well to protect yourself. But generally, as I said, just use common sense, do basic due diligence on things. Don't just kind of like throw money into anything. And I think you'll be all right for the most part. All right, so the next DevCon has been announced. Well, we already knew where the next DevCon was going to be in Bogota. I hope I said that right. I don't actually know how to pronounce the city right here. Bogota. I don't know. Someone's going to correct me in the comments, I'm sure. Apologies, guys, but this is in Colombia. It's going to be from 11th to the 14th of October 2022. Now, this is DevCon 6. Unfortunately, this was meant to happen in 2020. Got postponed. 2021 got postponed again because of COVID, and now it's happening in 2022. 11th to 14th to October. So I'm definitely going to try and be there. I think I will be able to travel to Colombia by that time. I know there are some countries that are still restricted to travel to from Australia. I'm sure I could get there by kind of like proxying through other countries, but I don't want to kind of like mess around with that because then it might be hard to get back to Australia. But I'm hoping to get there. I'm very, very excited for it. I mean, DevCon, like if you went to ETH Denver, that's like a mini DevCon from my experience. Like ETH Denver is huge as a kind of like Ethereum conference, but it doesn't compare to DevCon. At DevCon, there's pretty much like everyone there. The event's much bigger in terms of kind of like the venues, and it's kind of like, it really does bring together not just the Ethereum community, but like the crypto community as a whole. I think the only people who don't go there are Bitcoin maximalists, but like, do we really want them there? Probably not. I hope to see a lot of you guys there. I'm really excited for it, obviously. I'm really excited that we finally got some dates here. I don't think it'll get delayed this time. I mean, obviously COVID is still around, but obviously like a lot of the international restrictions, a lot of the travel restrictions have been kind of like eased up, and we have the vaccines and everything now. So we should be good to go there. So I'm super excited for it. But in October, I mean, there's plenty of conferences before that. As I've said to you guys, I'm going to be in ETH Amsterdam in April. There's also a conference happening in Australia called Blockchain Week in March, and I'm hoping to get to both Sydney and Melbourne over the 2 days in order to attend in person there. So that's going to be exciting. And then, I think that then it'll be ETH Amsterdam. Then it'll be kind of Blockworks and Bankless doing the permissionless conference in Florida. There's plenty of conferences, right? Like there's heaps happening before DevCon, but I think DevCon is going to be one of the better ones for sure. So very, very excited about that. All right, so Proto Lambda here from the Optimism team used to be an Ethereum, used to work in Ethereum R&D at the Ethereum Foundation, put together a thread that at Ethereum Denver, we, being a bunch of, like Ethereum client developers and researchers, hacked together a full data blob transaction prototype, aka mini dank sharding. So data blobs are the first milestone towards full Ethereum sharding, enabling rollups like Optimism to grow 100 times in capacity. And he says, here's a tweet thread about the prototype. So definitely go check out this thread, obviously, for the full information here, but this is awesome. I mean, you've probably been hearing about dank sharding and blob transactions and obviously optimistic rollups for a while now, and we're getting towards kind of like the point where we're like, okay, well, this is the holy grail of like Ethereum scaling. Like this is where we know we need to get to in order to scale by like 100, 1,000x, more than that over time, right? Like 10,000x over time. Polynar has been putting together a bunch of threads and blog posts about this as well, which I'm sure you guys have seen. If you haven't, definitely go to their profile on Twitter and you'll find links to everything there. But I mean, there's so much, it's all well and good to talk about it, but it's even better to actually build something. And that's exactly what Proto and a bunch of the other people here from the teams did. They built a prototype of this. So, I mean, the thing is that dank sharding is relatively new, and the fact that we already have like kind of like a prototype with this, coupled with the data blob transactions, which are obviously going to scale layer 2s, especially optimistic rollups, is awesome. And this got me super pumped up because, I mean, the smartest people in the world, not in the world, sorry, in the crypto world, are working on scaling Ethereum right now, and they're making such amazing strides. And I know that it's very technical. I know that it can be difficult to understand. I know that during my refuels, I don't do the best at explaining these sorts of things because it's kind of hard. Like, obviously, you guys know I do the refuel off the cuff. I don't have any notes in front of me or anything like that. But this is why I always point you towards these resources, because they do have the notes. They have the structured stuff for you to read through. They have links to additional information. There's no way I could cover this in even like a half an hour dedicated video. There's just too much going on. It's evolving too fast, and it's too technical at this stage for me to be able to break it down for you guys. But as I mentioned the other day about dank sharding, what it does is basically unifies Ethereum into data availability and kind of like settlement layer, so that we don't have a lot of the, I guess, like issues with composability and interoperability that we would have otherwise. And that, as I said, it's kind of like the holy grail here. But on top of that, we want these kind of like, I guess they're calling it data blobs or data blob transaction types, which is an EIP that will be going into the upgrade after the merge called Shanghai. Hopefully, it's not confirmed or anything, but like we're hoping to get into that, which will drastically reduce the costs of rollups. And we could be in a world of sub 10-cent transaction fees for optimistic rollups by the end of the year, Q1 2023 sort of thing. And then obviously going lower than that over time as well. And this is without all the optimizations coming to optimistic rollups too. So very, very cool to see this, and highly recommend checking out this thread from Proto. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Rocket Pool announced today that they are now running 1% of Ethereum's validators, so the Beacon Chain's validators. This is an absolutely massive achievement in only 3 months since they went to mainnet, and obviously a huge win for decentralization, as Rocket Pool is a decentralized staking pool service. It is not one of the centralized ones, and I'm just super excited to see this continue growing. I mean, as I've highlighted before, Rocket Pool is doing insanely well in the client diversity front. I'm pretty sure Prism is like under 10% or 20% or something like that. I think it's under 20%. So they're obviously doing extremely well there. But not only that, they're becoming a larger and larger share of the Ethereum validator set. Like 1% in only 3 months is pretty crazy, guys. Like especially for a newer protocol that has more risk associated with it because there's smart contract risk, obviously. 2, they came kind of like, I guess, late in the game. Like I think, you know, people staking has kind of tapered off. And we just have a bunch of people staking over time, but we obviously had the massive growth in the first year, and I think it's just been tapering off recently until the withdrawals are enabled, which won't be until the end of the year. So you know, this is just like contextualizing the growth here, and you can kind of like see just how bullish this is for Rocket Pool. Now, I think that not only is it bullish for Rocket Pool, but as I said, it's bullish for decentralization, for the Ethereum Beacon Chain, and for basically getting us off these centralized providers. Because at the end of the day, I mean, half the reason people will use these centralized providers to stake is because of the fact that they don't have the 32 ETH minimum required to stake, right? And that's totally fair. I mean, if you don't have the 32 ETH minimum, before Rocket Pool was live, you literally had to go with a centralized service. There was no alternative for you. You had to go with an exchange or a service provider. You couldn't actually do anything else. So I totally understand why people did it. If you had 32 ETH and you did it, I mean, I can understand, because that's the other half of the reason that people stake with centralized providers, and that's convenience, right? Obviously, setting up your own validator and setting up your own kind of like nodes and things like that on your own hardware and maintaining it isn't for the faint of heart. It is not like a super noob-friendly thing to do, and it definitely is not as easy as just clicking a button on an exchange that says stake your ETH. But in saying that, I think that if we can just kind of like catch that other 50%, which is the fact that people want to stake like on their own or want to stake in a decentralized way, but just haven't had the opportunity to, well, that's what Rocket Pool is capturing. And that market, I think, is massive. I think there are a lot of smaller ETH holders out there that obviously take decentralization extremely seriously, but they may be newer to the ecosystem. They maybe they weren't able to stack 32 ETH when it was cheaper, or there's a million reasons people don't have the 32 ETH minimum. And obviously over time, as the ETH price goes up, that's just going to get more and more out of reach for people. Now, there's an open question of like, will we actually reduce the minimum amount of ETH required to stake? I think we will at some point, but the thing is that, okay, let's do a bit of a theory crafting here. If we don't reduce the amount of ETH required to stake until ETH is like 20K, say, just for an example here, that would make it $640,000 to stake with ETH, to solo stake, I should say, sorry, and to kind of like stake on your own. Now, what if we reduce that to 16 ETH? Well, that's still $320,000 to stake. Okay, well, let's reduce it by half again to 8 ETH. I mean, you see where I'm going with this, right? That's still $160,000. Where is the entry level for a solo staker? Well, I mean, there isn't. Like, you could even argue that $10,000 is too much for a solo staker, because a lot of people can't afford that. So I think the prudent thing to do would be to not to base it off the dollar value of ETH, which we haven't in the past. We've based it off the kind of like network health and, you know, getting more validators onto the network, spinning more validators up. But I think tools like Rocket Pool help with that immensely, because what they do is obviously they pull the funds together and they allow all the smaller stakers to come together and spin up more validators, because you have to have that 32 ETH to spin up a validator, obviously. But I don't think the dollars is the bottleneck here. I think it's just ease of staking for people. I think that there are people out there who don't want to stake with a centralized provider, but they don't have 32 ETH. So now they're choosing Rocket Pool, which is awesome. So taking this all into account, and then if in a post kind of like withdrawal enabled world, I think Rocket Pool can get to like the 10% mark here as kind of like a part of the Ethereum network. We obviously don't want them to be like the 50% mark, because then it's like a central point of failure. But like around 10 to 20% would be really cool. And it'd be even cooler if there was another decentralized staking pool service as well. Like I think Rocket Pool is the only one. Like Lido, or Lido, however you say it, is currently centralized, but they do want to decentralize out. But we don't know what's going to happen there. Maybe they become a contender as well. But I do think that Rocket Pool is very, very far ahead here, and enabling a lot of other people to stake their ETH today without having to wait. So I'm super excited they finally reached 1%. Well, finally, I should say, reached 1% so fast in 3 months here. Congrats to them on that. And yeah, no sleep till 10%. And I think they can get to that. I really do think they can get to that. Maybe not anytime soon, just because it is an uphill battle, especially before withdrawals are enabled. But I'm optimistic in the next maybe couple of years we can get there. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens there. And actually, just one other update about Rocket Pool. You can now get Rocket Pool's ETH staking token on L2 via Argent. So it's even more affordable to stake now. All you have to do is trade your ETH for ETH on Argent, which goes through ZK Sync, and you'll start staking right away, which is super, super awesome, obviously. Now, unfortunately, there are some tax consequences here from going from ETH to RETH, depending where you are. I personally don't think it should be a taxable event, because you're trading a like-for-like asset, but that's not tax advice, and that's just my personal belief. You have to check with your accountant before you do it. I would actually recommend checking with your accountant before you did it, just in case something can kind of happen there. But yeah, if you don't care about any of that, and if you're happy just kind of like arguing that it's a like-for-like trade, well then, yeah, you can do this on Argent using ZK Sync, which is obviously really awesome. All right, so an update out of Zigzag Exchange here, which is a order book DEX that's been live on ZK Sync for a while. They're now live in an alpha version on Gurley's testnet on Starknet. So the first balancer AMM on Starknet allows anyone to list pairs while creating pools with custom token combinations in a permissionless manner. The new UI is coming soon, but you can go test it at mammoth.zigzag.exchange. So these guys are shipping pretty quickly, actually. They're obviously shipped to ZK Sync and have a great exchange on there, but now they're shipping it seems like a balancer style AMM on Starknet that allows anyone to list pairs while creating pools with custom token combinations in a permissionless manner. So really cool to see this. Cool to see the Starknet ecosystem growing as usual, right? Like I've been talking about that for quite a while. And I've said before how I think that the Starknet ecosystem growing is good for everyone, even if they're not EVM compatible, because it's always good to see some kind of like fresh stuff coming to market rather than just like the same old EVM stuff that we've seen, which is, I mean, I've said before, is fine, but I love innovation. I love seeing new things coming to market, and Zigzag's just been killing it on the shipping front here. So if you want to go test this out, you can. I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to do so. All right, so a bit of an update from Aztec Network today. So this update was first shared by Joseph here, who said, sneak peek of the new ZK.money UI built with Aztec Network's SDK. It's private by default, 10 to 30 times gas savings, L1 liquidity, social recovery, and it's coming soon. And then Aztec quote tweeted this by saying, you can deposit funds, you can automatically earn with Element, Lido, Element Finance, I should say, Lido and Aave and more, and send or withdraw privately to any address. Now, I've spoken about how Aztec is building privacy-preserving infrastructure before, and a lot of the stuff that they're doing is really, really cool around being able to kind of like tap into L1 liquidity from L2 and do it in a private way. And obviously, you can save on gas by doing this as well. It's not going to be as cheap as something like an Optimism or an Arbitrum, just because private transactions are inherently more expensive than the non-private ones. But I mean, privacy. Okay, it'll get cheaper over time for sure. But I think at this stage, like privacy, it's more expensive because it's more computationally expensive to run these things, or computationally intensive to run these things. But I think like everything's just going to be private by default, and it's going to be very cheap to do this as well. But this is how we get there. We build up these prototypes, we build up these primitives, we build out this infrastructure, and then we kind of like cut costs over time. So very, very cool. I guess, new UI and everything from ZK.money here. Sorry, from Aztec here for ZK.money. It's not live yet, but it is coming soon. So I'm very much looking forward to that. All right, so NorSwap here from the Optimism team had a really great Twitter thread about optimistic rollups versus ZK rollups. So it's a relatively, I guess, like short thread, only 19 tweets, but again, this just speaks to what I've been saying, I guess, over the last few months about people going too much to like the ZK rollup side and thinking that they're like the holy grail of Ethereum scalability. When in reality, there's pros and cons to optimistic rollups and ZK rollups, and they both fit into their own areas about what they're good at. I've discussed it before. NorSwap discusses it in his thread here, and I think the general consensus from what I know is that, and I've said this before, but like optimistic rollups, they work today. They're really awesome today. Their costs are coming down. They're kind of like very easy to reason about, and people can use them and all that good stuff. ZK rollups, ZK EVM stuff, blah blah blah. All the stuff that I've spoken about before. That is still a ways away. Yes, some of it's live today. Some of it's really cool, like Starknet, but it is not. It is not here today. It is not ready today. There are still a lot of things that need to be done to build it out, to improve it. It's still quite expensive to actually be I guess like a sequencer or a verifier or a validator in those networks, and that's why they're going to be more difficult to decentralize than an optimistic rollup. And as I said, they both have their pros and cons, but long term, I think the general consensus is that ZK rollups can be the big winner. But in saying that, long term could be 1 year, could be 5 years. Like, we don't know at this stage. There's too much happening, too much evolving. I'd rather use what works today. And optimistic rollups, they aren't that expensive, guys. Like, and it's not even just about expensive. It's also about kind of like the withdrawal delay. Well, we already got around that. You can use the other bridges or the kind of, I guess, cross-chain exchanges like Connext and Hop to get in and out of these things. Yes, there's a bit more risk added on top, but the thing is that like the risk that you take on is the convenience thing. And to be honest, at the end of the day, on Optimism and Arbitrum, they're getting more and more apps on there that you won't even really need to ever withdraw back to L1 Ethereum. And eventually you won't even be able to afford to withdraw back to L1 Ethereum for small things. Like if you just want to go back there and do something small, there'd be no point and it'd be too expensive. So really you just kind of like withdraw straight from the L2 to a centralized exchange as they add more bridges as well there. But I don't think that's like a major drawback. But definitely go give NorSwap's thread a read here. Kind of articulates this a lot better than I can, obviously because he works at Optimism. He knows his shit when it comes to this sort of stuff, but I really just want to change the narrative. I really want people to just stop thinking that it's just like optimistic rollups are obsolete, let's ignore them, we're not going to use them, and let's just go all in on ZK rollups. I don't think that's a healthy approach. I've never thought that's the healthy approach. I think the healthy approach is to support whatever works, whatever's good, and then let the users and the developers decide where they want to spend their time on. Because at the end of the day, it's really the developers that are building the products that users are kind of like interacting with, and wherever they want to deploy, let them deploy to. They're not being forced to deploy anywhere. they're making the conscious choice to do that, and the users are also making the conscious choice about what chain they want to go to, or what L2 they want to go to. So let that happen. That is the free market at work there. All right, final update here is just a couple of things from L2Beat. So last week, they released 2 updates on how they calculate TVL that drastically improves the metrics that they provide. The prices now come directly from CoinGecko's API, and there is no more need to manually specify tokens for each project as they are automatically detected. They also expanded the list of tokens that they track, further increasing the accuracy of their reporting. They still limit themselves to CoinGecko's top 300 to prevent TVL manipulation using low market cap coins. Really cool. I always love seeing things like this. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're tracking these things accurately. I have discussed before about how I think TVL is kind of a flawed metric at this point, but it has its uses. It can paint nice narratives, but it can also show that things are increasing in usage, especially if you denominate the TVL in not USD, but in kind of like ETH or some other token. I think that works as well. But yeah, cool to see this update from L2Beat here. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.